So it's 7:02. It's 7:02, I guess, or so. I will call the meeting to order. Welcome. This is the West River Modified Union. Oh, it's going to be one of these nights. Modified Union Education District budget meeting. Before we get started, I just want to, if you please sign in so that we have a record of who's here. When you speak, please identify yourself, first and last name, and town of residence for the viewing audience. You can't get fan mail if they don't know where to send it. And lastly, all the comments and questions should be directed to the chair, and then we'll refer it out. You don't get to talk to each other in the audience or individual board members. Okay? Okay, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda, folks? The one addition I have is, since we did move a budget forward at the last meeting, the easiest way to continue to make modifications to that budget would be that if we had we have a motion to rescind that action and put it back in play again. We can also amend individual pieces of it and put forward a combined budget, but the cleanest, simplest way is before we start changing it to just make that motion. Just requires a majority of the board has to be made by someone who voted in favor of the motion, but I just wanted to sort of bring that up to the board because that's the cleanest way if we're talking about making additional changes to the budget, which I believe we're considering.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Is that necessary when we didn't vote on a warning? Because I don't believe I wasn't here, but I don't believe you voted on a warning.
We did not vote on a warning. It is a Roberts issue, not a legal issue, and that was the cleanest way to do it.
Same question, but it's fine. I'm fine with it. I just didn't know
Okay.
whether we needed.
I'm not sure we do, but for just clarity, that was suggested as the easiest way to do it. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to add, change, adjust? Okay. I remind you of our board norms. They're in front of you. I think we need to remember to maintain focus, communicate respectfully, and the rest of the list, respect the agenda, all of it, but just the reminder. Members of the public, if you're here to discuss one of the items on the agenda, we'd ask that you talk to us then. If you're here to discuss something that's not on the agenda, now is your moment. Anyone? Bear with me. Some of you are behind pillars. I'll look for hands. I'll find you and keep track of where you are. But if I miss you, jump up and down. Okay. Okay. Anybody have any?
Side to side.
Yeah.
They're behind the pillar, up and down.
Yeah. Side to side if you're behind the pillar. Somebody in red back there is really in trouble. Ah, Patty. All I could see was like a little line of red. I'm like, so I know there's a person, but that's it.
I lost weight.
Wow, have you ever? Okay, any correspondence to report? I have nothing. Anybody? Flying through this agenda. Okay, the first item under old business was the announced tuition rate for the 2021 school year. We had started discussing that, but we had a request for more information. Everybody has that information now. So I believe the recommended rate was 17.9. 17. Thank you. 17.9. And then there was discussion about what we should do with that. So further to that, is that still the recommendation from administration?
Yes, that is still my recommendation.
Okay, so we can discuss that further now that we have that information, and if you have questions, please.
Oh, no one did that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Lori, what was the tuition rate? I know you don't have. I should ask. Do you yet have the maximum allowable this year?
It just came out?
Okay, so before you tell me that, do you also have not only this year's, but last year's and what our tuition rate was as well?
Your tuition rate last year was 17, or this year is 17.4.
17.4. Yeah.
Last year 17. Okay, and then the allowable came in at 23,000.
For this current?
this?
Or for next year?
It looks back. No, it looks back.
Okay, so.
Right, so what happens with allowable, and I can go ahead and explain it if you all would like. Okay. What happens with, between the time you announce tuition and the time that allowable comes out. So it's, allowable is always looking back at the previous year and what was billed, and if it's 3% over or under, then the receiving town could bill the sending town that over and above that 3%. Now, the Leland and Gray, to my knowledge, and you would have a better idea of being on the board for all those years, is they have never done that to Wardsboro, Dover, and Marlboro. Allowable tuition reconciliation, basically, is what it is, has never been done. And I think it's basically, there must have been an agreement in place between districts many, many years ago, long before me. So we probably should talk about that as far as an agreement is concerned, or whether or not the two boards, or the three boards, will engage in reconciliation of allowable tuition.
Do we get any tuition students from outside of our SU?
Yes. But if you do it for one, you need to do it for
I
all.
understand that, but I'm, so comparatively, what do we have, one or two, or
Yeah,
compared to?
just one or two.
I mean, it's a very low number.
Yes. Yeah, the majority of tuition students come from Wardsboro and, or River Valleys now. And next year, that actually is going down. So,
Good.
because they're, you know, you're looking at Burton, and you're looking at actually early college. So nobody gets tuition if the student takes advantage of that. And then there's just less students, less sixth graders in Wardsboro, Dover, and Marlboro.
Thank you.
More questions? True, go ahead.
Would it make sense to look at this after we've discussed the budget more? Seems like setting our tuition, and we still don't, assuming that we're going to discuss our budget, we still don't know what our cost per pupil is. Maybe a little premature. If we're talking about charging $17,900, the allowable is $23,000, and our current per pupil is $25,000, maybe that decision would be better made after we look at the budget.
We can, I think we can rearrange the agenda and look at the budget first.
Lori, is there a date?
It has to be announced by the 15th, or it reverts back to last year. I also do have, if you
15th
want
of
it
January?
now. January 15th.
In 2 days, okay.
In 2 days, it has to be announced, or it
Okay.
reverts back. You will only get 17.4, so.
Okay.
I do have some other comparables for around. I didn't get them on paper, but if you want them now, or if you're going to push the conversation, I can talk about them later.
We can, I mean, we pretty much have to make a decision on this tonight, whether we have a budget or not, or we set it at 17.4 by default.
Right.
So,
We're already talking about it now, let's just hear them.
Okay.
yeah.
So this is the comparison between announced and then the allowable. So BUHS announced, and this is all prior year because nothing's been announced yet, obviously. So BUHS announced at 15.5. Their allowable was 19,072. Okay. Twin Valley announced at 15. Their allowable was 22,114. Springfield announced at 17.6. And there must have been a calculation error because their allowable is 79,000, so. But I thought it would be good for a chuckle. And Bells Falls didn't announced at 16.2, but they must not have done all of the, this is all from the statistical report that we do. So they don't have a allowable. So those are just some comparisons of.
What's Burton's current tuition rate?
Burton announced tuition at 17,990,
17,990.
2.8% increase over last year.
Okay.
They don't have they don't have
Okay.
to, they're an independent school.
Okay. Yes.
Do you know, does BUHS charge the difference between the 15 and the 19 when they're allowed to?
They're allowed to, I don't know if they have agreements in place. They have not charged us, but we really only send, yeah, I don't know that they do. I'm trying to think, really Marlboro's the one that sends the most kids there, and we haven't done their books, so I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. There's very few other, I'm trying to think if Wardsboro sends.
Yeah. Please.
Just being the former principal of Dover, they did not.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We didn't do the books for you.
Okay. All right, so we can move and discuss the budget and circle back to this. We just have to make sure that we come up with something tonight, or we did by default. So, we have, the budget is the same as, as we adopted last time. I know that people have been, taking the week to look at the documents, and I'm sure there are questions and comments, and, that's what we're here for. So, any questions from the board after a week of looking? Okay.
True. I'll start first. I just want to clarify a few things before we get, so we're going to open the budget back up, or we just answer questions on the budget that has it existing?
If we can either amend certain parts of the budget, or we would need a motion to rescind the action that approved the budget, and then we would be back to no budget. We can certainly discuss possible changes, and then someone can make a motion, but, I mean, there isn't a, I don't know, someone can make that motion.
Okay, because there's no motion at this point. Just to clarify a couple things about this budget. We've reduced our student count slightly, but not significantly this year. We've added 4 FTEs to maintain the current educational programming for our kids, but we're not adding or subtracting. Just want to make sure that, I understand like the facts that are behind the budget, as we have members of the public here that are wondering why the increase is so significant. So, looking through the documents that were presented to the board, we're adding 4 full-time employees, or FTEs, in order to maintain where we're at, for a total of $700,000. Great document. For a total of $739,000.
329, is that what you said?
Our total increase this year is $739,000.
Oh, right, yes, I thought you were referring to the 4 FTEs.
So that's where we're at as far as this budget goes.
It is the 700, right.
So I guess I took some opportunity, can I keep going, Joe?
Yeah?
Took an opportunity to look through some of the rest of this budget, and there's a lot of services that are contracted. So first page of the budget, special education, line 5593, total. I'd like to point out that, the 40% increase, I'm assuming is probably staff related
5593.
on the first page,
First page.
in the pre-K section. When we work our way, through the other aspects of the budget, I had asked in December about the difference between staff members hired by the district and those that are hired by the SU, and it seems to be a fair amount of shifting of employees around. I did notice when you look at the total increase in salaries. For example, the kind of the direct instruction in the art line. Employees that are employed by the SU, total new dollars to that employee 2016. Total new dollars to the SU that we got billed back is $3,676. Seems like we're paying a $1,600 premium on the kind of the sellback of that service, which I thought was a bit excessive.
1106.
Looking down at some of the other services, guidance services. We have
Drew, can you say what page you're on when
I'm
you're
sorry,
referring?
on page 3, they're all 11 on mine.
Okay.
So under guidance services, line 2120,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
we had a .8 went to .99. So this position's $113,000 one FTE. So we're seeing an increase there. So it seems to me as I look through this budget, there's more than just the 4 FTEs that we were presented. There's FTEs that were purchased through agency funds of the SU that were never really laid out to us. So what is the total number of new employees that are actually in this budget?
The 4.0, the agency fund budget is coming in, for years has come over and fed into every district's budget. And just to clarify, because I know you had a question about the nurse being so much more expensive. So if you look at the nurse, for instance, 2132, that's the function on there, it's on page 3. There is an additional 0.5 nurse being added, but there's also nursing services purchased through the SU because they see more than one district. So in order to be able to split the costs, that's what happens. So if you were to take lines 5111 all the way down through, excluding the purchase service line, and increase that by another half, right, to compare apples to apples, it's $102,000 for that nurse versus the $113,000. So not a big difference, and that's personnel. That's where they fall on the salary schedule, what insurance they take, all of that. So really not a big difference there in the 2 services.
10% difference.
Because of being a different spot on the salary schedule, or maybe a different tier of insurance, one employee over another. That happens throughout the whole budget.
It does, and it happens with all of the SU sold back services, are all sold back at a much higher per employee rate than the employees that are employed by the district. When you look through and you start looking at the numbers associated with total cost from these employees, all of the SU employees are total compensation package in the mid-90s, 95 or $100,000 a piece, getting billed back to the district.
For their whole program, not just salary and benefits, right? So that's supplies and equipment and any other types of.
Okay, so in the, again, just to clarify for the public, like in the nurse section, total supplies are $1,000. So the supply number is not a big difference. What I'm looking at is where did the increases in this budget come from year over year over year? And we can look back to the 2019 budget we approved in 2018, and there are significant changes in the actual costs associated with certain programs. And I'm just trying to figure out why we're seeing such huge differences. So, for example, and this isn't an SU question, but it's a staffing question. English salaries in 2019 for the high school were $207,000, or $271,000 this year. It's a pretty substantial increase in what we're looking at. Math salaries, we went from providing math to our students here in 2019 for $255,000, and this year we're asking for $324,000. It's a lot of money over a 12-month period. You look at other areas, like science, we were at 242, we're at now at 253. To me, that seems like a more reasonable increase in the cost of the education. Cost of nursing in 2019 was $95,000, it's now $164,000. So when we start looking at the numbers and trying to explain to the public, all these people are sitting out here looking at significant tax increases. I think they deserve an answer as to why these numbers went up. You know, principal office cost, $292,000 in 2019, $475,000 in the proposed budget. Those are my questions as to why are we saying we have to cut programming? Where did these expenses get so big? These numbers are huge.
Answer that?
Yeah,
So would
we
it
should
be,
go with one.
so would it be helpful on those line items that you lay out to provide for the board a line item, the year-over-year cost, and some narrative detail, so that, say on the 27th, when the board meets again, they would have a full picture of the questions you're asking?
Well, at least two of those that you pointed out, English and math, both have notes next to them that there was a personnel change and a requested increase in teachers. So obviously, if we added another salary, then it would go up that much. I mean, it's not that things are staying the same in two of those areas that you pointed out, just as I'm going through looking at the budget that you have, that's published. You know, there's a personnel change and a requested increase, so those you would expect to go up. I lost you after that and haven't found the other ones that you've been talking about, but, you know, I mean, obviously we can get, there should be explanations for all of them, and we should be able to get them for you. We should get them.
Okay, keep going.
Sure, please.
So would it be helpful just to have a full comparison of purchased service from the agency fund at the supervisory union level and an explanation of each one of those?
Well, I think we, you know, as representatives of the public, owe it to the public to understand what we're putting forward as a budget.
Sure.
If there's a justification for the cost increases, I'd like to see it. We have established that we're not increasing programming for children. We've established that we've reduced our overall student population, but yet we're seeing significant increases in a lot of these line items. And to me, that I haven't seen a justification as to why we should spend this kind of money.
We can certainly do that analysis and bring it back to the board.
Is it possible to have people speak up? It's really hard to hear you.
We got chairs in the front row.
Come on out. We'll do our best.
Thank you.
So we have a request to better explain line item increases and the comparison of purchased services versus our own staffing. Anything else we want to task as we evaluate this? We do have another budget meeting in 2 weeks, so there's plenty of time to put the administration to work and see what we want to see.
Can we ask you to do something, or is it only like a board decision?
Well, the board has to make the request, but you can certainly ask a question.
Okay, so my name is Keegan, and I live in Jamaica. I'm a teacher up in Windsor. And I have struggled to really understand how the whole education funding thing kind of works. And it was really like a conversation that I had heard regarding a 19.1% increase in taxes that I'll be responsible for, provided the budget as is would go up. That being said, this was a nice opportunity for me to get to know a little bit more about education funding. So budgeters, I appreciate the work you've done. My questions are kind of two-parted. I actually met with our CFO at my school district, and I gave him our information. I said, can you help me better understand what this means? And based on the numbers that I picked up from the SU last week, our equalized pupil spending threshold for this district is $18,756. We are currently spending, according to this budget by the numbers, $21,127, which is a difference of $2,371. And it's that number. If you wanted to reduce that over expenditure, you would end up having to cut $1.2 million from your budget, which is significant. That's programming, that's offerings, that's salary, that's a lot of things. And as a teacher, I would never want to be the one to deliver that message of thank you for your service, but it's just not jiving anymore. So my question is, how creative can we get, or can you get really, with your programming, with your offerings, to bring down like the reduced number of student population that you have? I would hate to ask, like, but what does this look like? Because I don't recall ever in past years of voting for budgets, I don't recall an increase being this so significant with no real plan of how, like, this is not sustainable for our communities, truly. So what's your long-term goal? Like, if you need it one time, maybe, but what's your long-term goal? Kicking the can down the road is doing no one any favors, especially with a continuing declining population of students, an aging demographic of retired seniors who live on fixed incomes, and people like me that have 2 master's degrees are pretty valuable, really good teachers, but you know, how am I supposed to justify all of this and still be a taxpayer on a teacher's salary? I don't make $100,000 a year. So I'm hoping that you guys have a strategic plan long-term, because 19% to maintain no new programming for children and no building improvements. I understand you guys are still rocking some chalkboards. When are you going to provide your kids with 21st century learning environments and tools? How is that going to work? Like, I could be on board with 19% increase to bring your buildings and your facilities forward to provide an environment truly conducive to future learning for our kids. But 19% to maintain the status is incredibly unfair. It's a disservice to your kids, it's a disservice to your community. You know, we can pay, we will find a way, but we demand more. Our kids deserve it, and our teachers deserve it too. So what's your creative plan? That would be my suggestion. If someone on the board would take on the task of maybe making a motion to reevaluate your budget plan, looking at some degrees of creativity, bringing in a financial analysis person. You know, I want to say yes to a school budget because I'm so deeply connected to them, but 19% this year could be 20% next year to still maintain a chalkboard in 2020. Not that there's anything wrong with chalkboards, but that's my request. How creative can we be in either reconsidering 1.2 million or coming up with a serious plan that extends bigger beyond year to year?
Well, you know, I agree with you. This is not sustainable. We proposed some really creative plans before we even became operational, and we're told that, you know, we couldn't, the status quo needed to stay the status quo. You know, there are a number of things we could do in terms of consolidation and changing how children are educated and where children are educated. And we could be very creative. But those conversations are going to be extremely difficult because towns are going to lose their schools. You know, we're going to have to come together and have less buildings because doing the same thing in a bunch of different places costs money in each place. And until you start doing, you know, until you're not teaching first grade in 3 places, it's hard. That's one way anyway. But those are really lengthy conversations where we engage the entire community, and there's not time to do that for this budget. And I said at the last meeting that, you know, I think this is actually the tipping point. It's like, we can't do this. This is what it will look like every year going forward, where we try and squeeze a little more savings out of what we have, where we're not expanding opportunities and we're not giving children any more. We're just maintaining what we have because it's expensive to maintain all that we have. So yes, we need to actually, get a budget and then start talking about how do we, going forward, change what we do into a sustainable model, because we don't have one now. But that's a conversation that's going to take,
I understand our
laying that
conversation.
plan out, I said it would take the entire summer, and then next year's budget, we could start talking about, well, in this budget, these are the changes that we're going to make, and this is how we're gonna start to whittle away at that 1.2, so that we aren't over the excess spending threshold anymore. The only thing we could do now to get close to that would be draconian, I think. That's my answer. One sec. I believe Drew had a comment, and then we'll go to you.
So reviewing the superintendent's budget that gets assessed back to us, which is why it's important, what percent of the $103,000 new employee, which is a behavioral specialist, is getting billed back to this district? Because it's the first I heard about it was reviewing your budget. So I'm just curious, that's another new full-time position at $103,000 that's coming into this district. What percentage of it are we responsible for?
If it comes from special education, the SU bills on 80. So I believe you guys are 61%. Does that sound right? So 61,000.
So that is another new employee. So $60,000 worth of new employee in this district that wasn't actually formally brought to this board as a suggestion.
A position such as that, correct, would go through the WCSU board.
It's also special ed, so it's not like we have a choice.
Can I ask-
Sorry.
Sorry, please.
Go ahead, and then we'll go back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Clara Robinson, I'm from Jamaica also. And I'm listening to Drew, but I also listened to your board presentation on the 6th. And where somebody brought up, I think it was Drew, said, can we look at the SU budget? And I think you said no, flat, like that. And then somebody to your left said, no, that's not true. The SU can look at their budget. They can do whatever they want to do. Am I correct in, that's what I saw on tape anyhow. So I want to know, as somebody who's going to be looking at the 19% increase, what part of the SU budget does Jamaica get a benefit from? Can you tell me?
I can, sure.
Jamaica directly, if we're going to be paying 19-something%, close to 20%,
Sure.
what part of that budget does Jamaica get a benefit?
So every purchase service that specific to Jamaica. So if art is purchased there, if PE is purchased there, if counseling is purchased there, all occupational therapy, all speech language pathology, all physical therapy, all special education paras, all special education teachers, part of the behavioral specialist. My office, all the services from my office. So finance, superintendent, director of curriculum, the operations director, the special ed director, all of those services. The SU budget is in 3 parts. There's the central office budget, there's the special education budget, and there's the agency fund budget, which Drew was referring to earlier about the difference in cost of purchasing a service that is housed at the SU versus directly employed. So for a place like Jamaica, you would receive all the services that every other district receives from my office, the central office, and in particular to services that are purchased through the SU in the agency fund, and then every special education cost and transportation that goes through Jamaica.
So the budget that's within the SU for the office budget, we get benefit from the office budget?
You get all the services of everybody that is employed at my office.
We don't feel it.
I understand.
just for clarification, believe we were going to go back to you and then we'll start going around. But just for clarification, the WCSU budget, we don't control it. I mean, the WCSU board has representation from every board in the supervisory union on it. And we have representation on that board. That budget could be re-looked at, but we would not be able to force that with our representation. And then but that budget is voted on by, representatives from this board, representatives from River Valleys, and representatives from Marlboro, and also Wyndham and Stratton. Because every school district or education district in the Wyndham Central has representation on that board and gets services from that central office. We all share.
Clarification.
So you say you can't force it, but you could ask.
Certainly we could ask.
I mean, the other night it sounded like, no.
No, we could ask, but we can't, we can't force it. But, when I said, no, we can't, because we can't, it's out of our control. But then, whoever corrected me, it's like, well, we could certainly ask for that budget to be relooked at, but.
But if that would be a cost saving, I would think we would ask.
It would be a discussion amongst all the schools as to whether, amongst all the districts as to whether it was a cost savings. Clarification? Yeah.
The agency fund has not been voted on by the SU yet.
That is correct.
So the numbers I'm speaking of have not been voted on. So the SU agency fund is set after school budgets are set. So all of these numbers that I've been putting out can in fact be changed without changing the superintendent's budget, which would be the superintendent in the administrative office. That's the one budget that's been set. The
And
special ed is also
special ed. The other employees that we're speaking of are at the discretion of this board.
And the services you got to be asked. Right.
That's correct.
Okay, correct. You had a follow-up, and then I don't even know, Patty will go to you next.
So your current equalized pupil number is 512, and I'm aware that that number is based on a 3-year average. Do you have a projected, you guys go based on 2?
The state.
The state.
Oh, I thought it was 3, my apologies. So my curiosity then would lead us to, do you have an understanding of your projected potential pupils? Like, will you continue to see a continuous decline? Like, I understand like the 512 is designed to keep a sharp drop off from occurring number-wise. So do you have a projected estimate of how many equalized pupils you're going to have for your next budget cycle? You're going to have some hard conversations. I might start thinking about what you can do now to start preparing for those so that you have a leg to stand on when your election comes due. You know what I mean? So what are we going to continue to see a decline in student enrollment? Or is there some kind of plan for like attracting additional kids to come into the district to kind of increase that?
Do you have those numbers yet?
Well, we have, I did put together a chart here that has past years, and so it shows the decline in students.
Do we have forward-looking numbers yet?
It is, I did talk to our IT director today, he's been analyzing mainly Leland and Gray, and is seeing the leveling off that we had talked about that has, I think we've been talking about it for at least the 3 years that I've been here, that at some point there is a leveling off. And so that looks like that's what's starting to happen for the Leland and Gray students. So that's good news. And then the elementary have been actually pretty steady or growing because of pre-K, offering pre-K offerings. So, but there has been, as you can see from this sheet, 17% over 3 years is a lot of students to lose. I'm concerned, honestly, about the tuition students as well.
Right.
So it's not just equalized pupils, but.
Beyond the 17% decline, over time, and this might just be a foolish question, I know when I have to plan out my budget for my classroom, which is a very small amount, it has to go according to the number of kids I have. So if from one year to the next, my number of students goes from 100 to 85, then my supply budget is decreased by that much as well. My curiosity is, how, like, does your budget match the decline? Either, I would doubt very much for teachers because it's truly a minuscule amount. But in general, does the school budget match the declining enrollment as well? Or is this truly like the needs of our students that we have tends to increase despite the fact that we have a lowering number? Is that the relationship that we're seeing
Yes.
as a result of this?
Yes.
Fewer students, higher needs?
So we have had a 17% decrease over the last 3 years, but correct me if I'm wrong, it was 1.3% reduction from last year to this year. That's what we're working on
1.6,
now.
yeah.
Hence the bottoming out and the potential for.
Right. Last year's equalized people, this year's equalized people were 1.6. 6 students, so that was actually very good news because I expected we have the hold harmless, but we can't drop more than 3.5%, so I had thought we might hit that, but we didn't, so that was good news.
Patty, you had your hand up next.
So, my first concern that I have coming here tonight is the fact that this budget was voted by the board on draft 2. No drafts were available to the public anywhere unless you came to a meeting or called the central office. There was nothing online. They were all, the warning time deadline for budget approval was originally the 27th of January. So one could think that they had this week to come and talk about the budget before you voted on it. And I don't know that any of you had it days before you actually voted on it. My thought is maybe you just got it that night. So that really is a deep concern for me. And second, I believe that when you're thinking of cuts, the first cuts that should be thought of are cuts that do not directly impact the students, such as the superintendent office, the agency fund, those kind of things. So that's my thing for tonight.
Sure.
So another question that we could get answered for is, if you go to the back page, not the very back page, second to last page, section 50, line 5591, is if there's another 1.6 FTEs that we've purchased from the SU that wasn't in our new employee list. So I have no idea what that service is.
So, Drew, I just want to point out too for the public, if you go back to the 12-9 video online, the BCTV, I went with the whole board, went line by line explaining the budget. So it'll be a little easier to follow, I think, if you watch that video. And so that is just a note so that you understand that we have talked about it. So as I said then, in the elementary line item, under direct instruction, you will see, and I have a note there also, that the I'm on the first page, that the 1.6 FTE moved to the WCSU for the academic, AST means academic support team. And there was also a 1.0 position, teaching position, that was, there was no cost for that because it was a shift. But the 1.6 was moved to the WCSU because we created an academic support team. So that's where I talk about on the I think it was the 9th of December, where it comes back in, Drew, where, do you remember that? Where I said it comes back into this budget in the purchase service.
Does it come back to the same price or more?
It comes back the same price.
And while I have the floor, can I get an explanation of the technology services? Because we got 3.5 FTEs for $440,000. The bottom of the same page.
So again, this is not just the personnel, right? It's a whole program that's through the agency fund, and the whole technology budget is through the agency fund, which involves software, hardware, of which, you know, West River has the biggest portion again, because you are the biggest district. So it's not just salaries and benefits. I think that's important. I put those numbers, those FTE numbers in there so that you see year over year what the change of FTEs are. But when you're purchasing a service, you're purchasing the whole service.
So how do we know if it's cheaper to purchase this service? Because, you know, when you divide this up, it looks like we're paying $140,000 an employee.
But you're not, right?
But we
I
don't
just
know
said-
that because we can't see that.
Right.
So we're just supposed to accept a $440,000 number as a fee in this budget and not know exactly what's in that?
And
We're
that's all
talking
part of that
1.2
agency.
million is what we need to cut. And this is 440,000. We don't even know what's in there. We just know there's 440,000 on this line. So can we see what's in that line?
Yes, that's all part of that, what we just talked about. That's part of the agency fund that.
I mean, 440,000 is one line. It's more money than we put towards the entire Jamaica Elementary School. Like, we should see what's in these lines. It went up by $65,000. And I still haven't had an explanation. Does anybody else know what's in that 440,000?
Salaries, benefits, software, hardware. Well, we all knew that. Do we know the exact amount? I don't remember.
I think it's in
We
that-
had line items
Right,
in the budget when we went over it.
I mean, we can bring the agency fund budget and give you the line-by-line breakdown of that 440,000.
Right.
We're asking them for 20% more. I think we should probably know why we're asking.
We can get the agency fund budget breakdown. Yes,
So I don't know if this is going to end up.
could you identify yourself?
Yeah, sorry, CJ King from
Thank you.
Jamaica. First thing to put on that I'd like to say is that I went back to my notes from 2016 or 15, and the reason that the way that we were sold on going into this union to begin with, as I recall, were two main goals. One is that we would save money. And the second is that we would provide better educational opportunities for our children. And as we're saying, we're just staying even and not saving money. So neither of the promises that were offered to us as we voted ourselves into this union have been realized. And I'm very interested in this long-term plan as well. Where are we going with this? Because we can't sustain it. I guess I do have two questions. One question, two parts. What is the increase in salary for the district? And what is the increase in salary for the supervisory union in the upcoming year?
What's the salary increase in the SU budget?
So,
The percentage.
so different people receive different amounts. I can only speak at the central office level. It was 3% to 3.5% in this budget, of which you are assessed $610,000. We are in negotiations right now for every member of the master agreement, which includes all special education employees and all West River employees. So that has not been determined yet, but we built in increases based on historical precedent.
Last year's increase for the union workers was 3.25%. And we're negotiating for this.
So I also put that information on here so that people could see negotiated increases over 3 years.
Page 81.
This sheet here. And also the healthcare increases, the average healthcare increase over the 3 years that we're talking about, 18, 19, and 20, and 21, or that's 4 years, but there was a plan change in 18, was 11.33%. Healthcare has increased. that is not a controllable cost.
So just to clarify, I know that at my district, like healthcare is a completely non-negotiable when it comes to our union conversations with our board. And it's only like the salary increase because healthcare is really like done through the state, is my understanding, isn't it?
As of January 1st, 2021.
Okay.
Didn't you have a second question?
That was the two questions,
Okay.
supervisory union and other.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Drew.
So what that really works out to is new money for our district employees between $3,000 and $5,000 a year per employee, new district money. Looking into what our seniors get, they got 1.7% of increase in Social Security. So just to kind of put it in perspective, those are the people that we're asking to pay this bill. They got 1.7% and the cost of Medicare went up. So they not only got a small increase, but then had to shift that to their health insurance. And we're asking them to front another $3,000 to $5,000 per employee in this budget.
Yes, sir.
In Williams, Jamaica. I can't grasp something here. Jamaica's got the smallest population in the school, and yet we've got the largest increase in taxes. So are you telling us that our teachers and our personnel at the school are being paid that much less, and you're going to bring them all up to the standard? How did you justify the increase of each town? What was the factor that said, Townsend's going to pay this, Newfane's going to pay this, Jamaica's going to pay this? What was the balancing?
That's all done according to the state school funding formula. All by adopting a budget, we end up setting an education tax rate, and then it goes through the state funding formula where it goes through CLA and there's a, I'm sorry, what? There's a, there it goes through the threshold and the yield and the funding formula, and then Newfane and Brookline did not hit a target tax rate last year, so they were held, they could only have a 5% increase or decrease in their taxes, whereas Jamaica and Townsend hit that target threshold last year for a tax rate. So Jamaica has the largest tax increase, and Townsend is right behind it with 17%. I'm sorry?
And so the new information that I just gave you, we can talk about. Townsend actually did fall into the 5% protection. That was my conversation on Friday afternoon with Brad James at the FASBO meeting.
But I think what's important to sort of looking at it from a higher level, Jamaica's always been part of, or has since the very beginning, been part of the Leland and Gray Union High School District, which doesn't exist anymore. But the formula and the way we distributed the dollars and took in the dollars is the same as it is for, essentially the same as it is for the West River District. So, we just have we're just doing it from pre-K-12 now instead of 7-12 like we did before. So it's based on the number of students you have and the costs that we incur, and each town has their own CLA. That's still the same, that hasn't changed. So every year, towns can see some spikes and decreases, and they have been able to do that through the Leland and Gray District for
It
many
seems
years.
like
So
2
it's a
years ago,
similar.
they went way over budget. And Jamaica did. I think it was like 10%. And the state, at that point, wasn't allowing a 10% increase. But they put it through anyway. Now, are we being penalized for trying to have a better school? And that's one of the things that I'm really starting to get interested in, because it seems to me with 35 students, why do we have a 19% increase?
So how many students does Jamaica have?
Jamaica has more than 30-something
That's-
students.
Because you're talking about school and we're talking about town, so some of Jamaica students may not go to Jamaica building. So I guess it's maybe easier to look at it as a building. So that is not, no matter how many students you have in the building, there you go, there's 65 students that Jamaica has to count, that they count, not the 35 that are in the building, or I don't know how many are in the building, but, yeah. So it's hard to make sense of that. I know it's harder to make sense, but it's still the number of students that reside in the town of Jamaica that you're funding.
Okay.
Some go here, to Leland Gray. Some go to Townsend, I think. Yeah, it's a complicated funding formula.
But
That has been
meanwhile,
for
we're
20
supposed to
years.
put our money down on it without understanding it. So if I go to the store to buy a can of beans, I can look at the ingredients on the back of it, and I can say, oh, okay, I want to spend $1.50 on this. But we're being asked for a 19% increase for something that's too difficult to understand. We don't know what we're getting for it. That's why we're here.
Crystal, you were.
Maybe we need some state representation here.
Crystal Gorville, Wyndham, Vermont. I have a question, kind of two questions. So, like with Jamaica, I mean, their population has decreased dramatically. A lot of people choiced out to Townsend. And I'm not sure I fully understand this. I know with Wyndham, we're a really small population. Our cost per student is $28,000, going up to $30,000 next year. Is it true that you pay some kind of a penalty if you don't reach a certain goal? So my question is that why Jamaica's seeing a huge increase because of the amount of students in their building? And my other question is, I thought I understood consolidation to be like we would decide to keep 3 buildings open, like Newfane, Townsend, Leland, and Gray, and put like K through 2 at Newfane and 3, 4, and 5 at Townsend. I thought that was going to happen with the consolidation, and that's where we would see the dramatic decreases in our costs.
So the only penalty that is in play here is a penalty that's district-wide for the West River District. The threshold, the spending threshold is 18,756, and we spend over that. And so every dollar over that is taxed double. And that penalty is spread out over the entire district. Our budget creates a unified tax rate of $2.16, okay? And then it runs through the funding formula, which takes into account CLA, and, excuse me, that takes it and makes it, you know, the 35% increase that Jamaica has. You know, everyone starts with that same base education tax rate, and then it goes through the individual town's CLA, and depending on what your CLA is, that boosts it or drops it. And that's where the increase is coming from. I mean, everybody has the same base tax rate. Lori?
Joe, can I just
Fix
talk
me?
about the CLA?
Yes, please.
About a little bit,
Got you
because
next,
this
and
is
then
important
Phoebe,
for
I got you.
Jamaica residents to understand.
Can you
is
tell us, first of all, what CLA stands?
Common level of appraisal.
Yeah, that's what
Thank
they
you.
say.
And it's about it measures your fair market value. So if your houses are selling above fair market value, your CLA is going to be higher. And if it's selling below, then your CLA is going to be lower. Did I say that backwards? I just heard myself. But anyway, the Jamaica CLA in fiscal year 16 was 113%. So that meant that your properties were selling 13% basically above fair market value. The CLA for this budget here is 99.46. So
Across the whole district?
no, that's just for Jamaica.
We just had a reappraisal.
So you just had a reappraisal back in fiscal year 18, was it?
Right.
Yeah, okay. So that's a very large difference. And that has nothing to do with what this board voted for a budget. Has nothing to, that CLA has nothing to do with that. Right, so if you were to, another example would be, if the budget from last year, fiscal year 20, was exactly the same, and that's what was being presented, the CLA from last year to this year also dropped from 101.49 to 99.46. Your tax rate would go up even though the budget was exactly the same. So it's not just about the expenses that the board is approving or not approving.
Okay, Rick, then Phoebe, then you in the back.
Just to speak to the CLA, Townsend's CLA this year is almost dead on what it was last year. And the original projections anyway was still for a 16.23% increase. So that can't be blamed on the CLA. I mean, I want to make that really clear because we got hit by CLA last year. But this year it's almost dead on. We're still looking at a 16+% increase in the 30 cent. You know, so that is directly attributable to the costs.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I was saying if the budget didn't change at all from one year to the next. But yes, you're right.
Phoebe.
Phoebe Connolly, Newfane. I just wanted to answer the question about what do those 65 students from Jamaica, like what do they get? I'm sorry, I think it's your comment or question about the students from Jamaica and what do students get. I think one thing that we have to realize is what those students get is if you take a Leland and Gray employee that's been at Leland and Gray for 2 years and a Jamaica employee that's been at Jamaica for 2 years, we could tell you every single thing about those 65 kids that are within that school and further within that community. And that's something that the current structure makes happen. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about being in this community is that we get to be educators who know our students and really know them. So that being said, I agree, 19%, whatever the numbers are, is an incredible increase. And I've been at many board meetings to see and hear, to also be dumbfounded that we're in the situation that we are at this point. So really, none of us in this room are in an envious position because you all have to figure out what to do about the increase and we potentially have to pay it. So I feel like that's kind of how we're gonna figure this out, is recognizing we're all in a crappy situation, but we know all those 65 kids and we wanna do what's best for them. So good luck.
You, sir.
Greg Jolly from Jamaica. So if I understand correctly from what was just described as the CLA, that even if Jamaica school closed, helping the district decrease their budget needs, that we could still be looking at sizable percentage increases in our taxes because of the CLA. So even if we shut a school that we want to have in the town to save the district money, we will still be potentially looking at large percentage increases to our taxes. That's what I just heard. That's why people are concerned.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
We discussed those numbers kind of, last week. Closing Jamaica isn't where we're going to find the bulk of the savings. And I think, Laura, you had some information, one about the small schools grant that Jamaica brings to the district is quite valuable. And the total budget that we spend there is around 300?
I think it's closer to 400. I think it's 388 I'm just trying to get into the look again. But it also would trigger losing the small schools grant, which is around $91,000. So it's really, between the two, it's not a lot of money that it would reduce this budget by.
Look, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
The small schools grant that you're talking about with Jamaica, that's actually what we were calling the merger support grant, is that correct?
Yes.
So that's a flat number that is given to us currently today because the four towns merged together to form one district. There are new calculations, so new ways to calculate. The state board created new restrictions around small schools grants. And I'm not sure Jamaica would or wouldn't apply, wouldn't get them without having merged. That is a in perpetuity grant we get as long as the school stays open.
I was going to say, as long as that
The school closes.
Right.
And just because somebody asked it earlier, the decision of the study committee to present articles of agreement to the 5 towns was to include an article saying that no school would close without a vote of the community. And that was something that was a little unusual from most articles of agreement around the state. There may be 1 or 2 others who did it, but this West River District, what became the West River District, the people who proposed the study and the articles really felt it was important. The schools were all important in each community, and that if a community wanted to keep their school open, they could. It didn't mean that they have to be configured the same way they are, whether they're pre-K 6, pre-K 5, but it needed to be, we need to be able to keep a school open if a community decides to do so. A community can decide to close it, but it's just important that it's part of the articles.
Okay, I got you guys all out there. I got one up here, and then there's one way in the back, right? Behind you. Mike, go ahead, and then somebody was way back there, right? Yeah, okay, right after Mike, and then I got you and you.
Just talking about the small schools grant, in Jamaica, because that is the most obvious thing if we were to look at that. I just want to point out, I think I heard when I watched the last meeting that Townsend's dangerously close to losing its small schools grant based on the number of students. So it just for everybody to realize that if Jamaica were to close and a lot of those students came to Townsend, it might not just be 90,000 we lose, it might be 180,000 in small schools grants that we lose. If it puts Townsend over. Okay.
So there's 2 triggers. It's if you're over 100 students, but then there's also a class size.
And it doesn't count pre-K, right?
I don't believe so.
No.
Okay. All right, way in the back there, and then closer to the front, and then got you.
Danielle West from Jamaica. So my understanding when we had merged together, as brought up before, it would be equal everything for the students. They would have same opportunities. This was going to increase their education. And one thing I've noticed this year is maybe a New Brook student gets this, but a Jamaica student doesn't or has to pay for it. Is that different in this budget? Does every student get the same exact thing? Like I was told the 5th grade field trip, New Brook students, it's paid for. Jamaica has to fundraise for it. So has that been taken into consideration in the new budgets?
Yes.
Yes. Also to go back to Keegan's about she gets a certain amount per student. for supplies. We did that throughout, actually, the whole SU. We tied the amount of supplies that a teacher gets back to the amount of students in their class for equity purposes too. So.
Thank you.
I had a question. I'm Bonnie West from Jamaica, and on the small school grant, would it be advantage to us if Newbrook and Townsend are not eligible for small school grant, if some of their students was reconfigured and come back to Jamaica, so all 3 schools would be eligible for small schools grant and increase your revenue?
Unfortunately, as of fiscal year 18, if the town or the school district did not qualify for a small schools grant, then in Act 46 they don't get it in perpetuity. I can't say that word. Perpetuity.
Increase the revenue.
So Newbrook did not. Well, it's actually Brookline and New Fane that actually get the revenue, but they did not qualify in fiscal year 18, so they don't get it going forward.
Just Townsend?
Yes.
And will they continue to?
That is the hope. It depends on class size.
I'm going to say if that's the case, so they can keep it, it should be, the student should be reconfigured so that we take advantage.
Karen Amadon, Jamaica. So there's a budget for all the schools, and then taxes are raised. The amount of taxes raised, is that the same amount of the budget, or does money go to the state?
Ever since Act 60 and Act 68, it's a statewide property tax. So no, it is not a one-to-one correspondence between what is decided on by each individual town approving a budget pre-Act 68.
Try to figure that out? And where are we at?
I do not know that figure.
So the state, well, it's not that it's just really, it's a formula. So the first thing that people need to recognize and understand is that spending happens at the local level. I know a lot of people, because of the system, the formula that we have, which is a statewide education funding formula, a lot of people think that it's the state that sets your spending, but it isn't. The local school districts around the state develop budgets and pass budgets and decide on spending. Then those figures are sent to the state, and then the state has to come up with the revenue to pay for that from the spending plans that happen in each district. So then it goes through a big funding formula, and Lori can speak to all the little pieces of the funding formula because she has to deal with it all the time. And there are lots of factors like weighting factors, which we are now hopefully looking at to maybe modify down the road. And then it gets redistributed back. And it's a very complicated formula that a lot of people don't understand, and you mentioned it as well, that it's really hard to understand, but it can be understood, and every step can be explained, and Lori is, I'm sure, really good at explaining it to any individual who wants to understand it, but it's just really important to recognize that it's the local spending. I will say that large spending districts can impact, everybody's spending impacts each other, right? So that's part of the reason why there's an excess spending threshold. Some people love it, some people hate it, but it is designed to encourage folks to not spend too much in their own individual district because everybody's spending impacts each other in this statewide funding formula.
And it's been that way since Act 60.
And 68.
Jamaica has been struggling with that every single year. We've cut back on everything. There's nothing more to cut back on. And now we have a principal who is struggling to do the job with 104 days a year, and we don't have a principal 5 days a week. Do the other schools have a principal 5 days a week? Are you both there 5 days a week?
Yes.
And that's hurting our school. It hurt our advisory group. I mean, we're not
we weren't doing the same things that the other advisory groups were doing because there wasn't a full-time principal. So it's tough.
So the reason Act 46 came about, and there were several proposals prior to Act 46, but they all came about because of decline in student population. I mean, and it's not only been coming on us for a really long time, it's continuing. And we're still seeing it continue. And it's continuing in a way that wasn't anticipated even 5 years ago. It's a national trend. It's not just Vermont. We're feeling it everywhere. It's a global challenge that we're dealing with right now. And I think, you know, I was in the legislature when we passed Act 46. And even I didn't anticipate it continuing to go, the trends to go the way they are. And when this district made the decision to open up school choice, that's what changed, inter-district school choice. That's what changed the numbers in Jamaica itself, and why parents get to choose within limits of whatever we said in our policy on inter-district school choice, and that's why the numbers in Jamaica went down. I think the number of students actually in Jamaica went down as well, but the number of students in the building there also went down because of parents choosing another school to send their child to.
Yep, you had your hand up for a while.
So real quick, and if it's not public information, I'll apologize for asking in advance. The school district that I currently work in, we lose a good portion of our population of high school students to go to like an ODP type program or like an alternative setting. And some of our students through special education needs will typically head to another school that's more conducive to maybe meeting some of those needs that kids have. Those schools are typically very expensive, they're very good, but my question is, based on the current population of kids that you have here, is there the intention of like reintegrating any students that are headed out to an alternative program to kind of get them to come back into our schools? Now, I get it that sometimes the best placement may not be a general education school or public school setting, but to be fair and equitable and inclusive, I think foundationally all kids from this community ought to be with other children, regardless of how old they are. So I'm curious, what portion of your budget is being sent out in tuition for those higher needs programs? And is there a possibility where you could rethink or use some of that funding that's going out to implement a program that can be here that could support the needs of those students in a fair and equitable way that would maybe also be cost effective? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'll start, and if you want to jump in, feel free. We currently have 3 in-district programs, 2 that are housed here at Leland and Gray, 1 at Marlboro.
Okay.
That is part of the, when people say, what are you doing at the central office? That's part of what we are doing, is planning and preparing for that. The behavioral specialist that was hired is part of that long-term plan to do exactly what you're talking about. It's preparing the environment so that students that grow up here can stay here. Each individual decision is made by an individual education team. But what
and parents, I'm sure, too.
Absolutely. So our responsibility is to look at the demographics and the reality, and then prepare environments in which we can do exactly what you're talking about. In terms of the amount of money sent out, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
But when we had our, now 2 years ago, audit of our system by the district management group, that was one of the big pushes, was to start staffing up your environment so that you can then receive those students back. But that is a long-term proposition. That is not a one-year thing.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm long-term. I know immediately some things, sometimes it is what it is, and I can appreciate that. But I like knowing what will happen and what can be anticipated. And if we have time to come up with a solid plan that does take into consideration, like, let's make a plan beyond next year. Contract negotiations with teachers, it's really a huge burden on them to have to ask for, please accept my professionalism and pay me my value and worth.
true. I heard the proposed increases per teacher being like $3,000 to $5,000 depending upon where they fall on the pay scale. In the grand scheme of things, that's not that much spread out over 52 weeks. In the private sector, a 3% or a $3,000 increase over the course of the year is really like a cost of living increase and maybe a night out to dinner if you go to a good place. Thank you for my question.
So, just to go back to the school choice thing, and it's a little off topic, but can the Jamaica students who went to Townsend, can they, if they want, if we do special things, come back to Jamaica?
Yeah. Can I take this question?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, the board's policy is that when you make a school choice decision, that becomes your home school, and we open up school choice every March. So if I am in Townsend right now, I live in Townsend, and I chose to go to Jamaica, Jamaica is now my home school, but in March of the year, my parents and I can apply for that, and depending on space in all the other schools, what the board has tasked me to do is look at what the current population is, and then determine based on the board's class size guidelines, how many slots are available for school choice. But that is an annual choice that is available to parents.
Yes, sir.
A question, going back to the discussion about the local districts or the towns set the budgets, and then the state has to figure out how to pay for it. So my question is, with Jamaica having a 19.5% increase in front of us, is 19.5% of that increase coming to this district? Is all the money that we're going to be putting forward, paying in our taxes, is it coming back into this district, into these schools, into our kids?
No.
No. Part of that is the excess spending.
Go ahead.
Where exactly does the excess spending penalty money go? Does it just filter through with how they divide it across the entire state?
Montpelier.
Well, it goes to the ed fund. That's where it goes. And it depends, and then, you know, as all of the tax dollars go to the ed fund, and then it's dispersed based on the spending. I will tell you that Friday, I did learn that the ed spending fund, or the ed fund has an $8.8 million surplus right now, or fund balance, which they will be most likely raising. So the yield is something that the commissioner uses to raise and lower tax rates. And so they're most likely, and there's never, I can't be quoted on it because I'm not sure what will happen in the end, but before town meeting, the yield will probably go up because they'll use that $8.8 million to offset. And that means your tax rate will go down. Will it go down a lot? It will probably go down 2 pennies, roughly. So, but that's the balancing act. It's the same type of thing that the districts do. You know, they might have a fund balance, in which case, in a future year, they use some of that money to pay down their tax rate, right? So West River's only this is only the second year in, so potentially next year, if there's a fund balance, they could do that.
Yes.
Thank you. So realistically, the likelihood of this body of caring, heartfelt community members, the likelihood of cutting $1.25 million out of this budget is probably not going to happen. Fair statement? Because you don't want to alienate your schools, you don't want to alienate your communities, no one wants to fire a teacher, because if you're that person that's like, sorry, well, the only thing that's worse than that is saying, sorry kids, you're not worth the time or money either. So, big picture, how do we fix this? Is there an opportunity this year to come up with a feasible, sustainable plan? Or is this one of those moments where it's like, you know what? It is what it is. We've kicked the can down the road long enough, and now we're here. and this is what it is. It's not going to improve. At best, we can do some strategic planning and come up with a better plan next time. I'm looking for clarity. Is there anything we can do to fix this now, or is it what it is and we just have to figure out something better long-term after town meeting day?
I can answer that, if you want to hear my answer.
There's one opinion, sure.
In my opinion, you can't fix this right now. It's going to be a long-term thing, and there's going to be drastic changes. It's going to have to be, okay, we're going to have to look into combining supervisory unions. We're going to have to look into cutting that excessive administrative cost that we have. We're going to have to look into buildings that have outlived their usefulness. For me, I don't think it's closing an elementary school is going to do it. Every town should have a public place in it. It might have to be that this building might have to close. We might have to be a sending school for high school kids. That might be the answer. I'm not going to recommend that, but I'm going to tell you that might be the answer.
But for this fiscal year and
This fiscal year, it looks,
is what it is.
last year, Newfane is the one who bit the bullet last year. Newfane and Brookline. Newfane had like the 12%, Brookline was 10%, and then there was like, I think, 4 and 2, something like that, for Townsend and Jamaica, the way the budget went. But I knew that and predicted that for years, that the first year we were gonna get banged because we had the lowest cost per pupil at that level, and then all of a sudden we had to bring all those students up to where everyone else was at a higher level. So they took less of that $1 million increase in the budget because it was a $1 million increase last year. Okay, so theoretically, the budget's going up what it would cost to run a small school every year. And it's going to do that because you have salaries, there's increases in salaries, medical has been jumping up the last 2 years like crazy. Special education, and that's going to special education is even going to get worse. The state has a new funding formula that they're going to be sending us less and less every year, no matter what our needs are. So, it's going to get worse. We're going to have to look and be proactive. Where are we going to save the money? What are we going to cut? I don't want to see any program cut for any child. I don't. I want to see more programs added. But we're not an endless fountain of money if everyone's going to say my taxes are going up 20%, and we're not getting any more. And it's true, but this was bound to happen. And we have now the retreat might close, so you got those people that might be moving. It's an economic thing. It's just if the economics turn around. More people will move here, more people will have kids, Can't do that overnight.
You're going to tax rates and they're not going to move here.
And we're actually losing people because of that too. You're absolutely right.
Okay, Drew, you were next. We got this. So Drew, go ahead.
I would disagree. I think there's something we can do. We're adding a whole bunch of new employees to maintain the same level that we have today. I think we look back to our administration and we say, continue to provide the same level today without the new employees. It may be time to ask our employees to step up and provide a little bit more. We're going to ask the taxpayers to throw 20% more on the table. Why don't we look at our teachers and staff and say, we need you to put a little on the table too. Maybe you need to run a little bit more lean. And this is no different than any other business in this country. When your product gets too expensive, you got to cut costs, you got to run more lean, you got to run a better operation. And we can't just keep throwing people at this problem. We're not adding services, but we're adding new employees. And maybe it's time to look at our administration and direct them to say, figure out how to do this more efficiently. And I think we can fix it this year. There's a big chunk of this money that is new employees and new benefits. This is not maintaining, this is adding staff to maintain the same number of programs. You know, cutting $500,000 out of this budget is possible, and it would have a significant effect on the tax rate.
But you would still need, to truly fix the tax rate piece, it would have to, $500,000 sounds like a lot, but it's really not gonna be sufficient.
So
Even if you
because
cut
we
$1
can't
million
solve it all,
from the
doesn't mean we
budget, it
shouldn't
would
try to
still
get
wouldn't be
somewhere.
high enough.
This
It would
this
still be
is what
high.
we were talking about, the conversation,
sorry.
everything gets directed to me, we go back and forth.
My apologies.
So, yeah, I mean, in this budget, there are still 4.25 FTEs that are added to this that admittedly do not add new programs. They do add services to some students that aren't getting them now. You know, there's additional guidance, there's additional nurse, there's a math teacher, I believe, isn't that, to address AP?
0.75.
The .75 math teacher. You know, there are some, I mean, there are some things that are new, but I mean, we are adding essentially 4.25 to maintain the status quo. It's not wrong. You had a question?
Yes. If and when this budget fails, what's your first step? I mean, realistically. I mean, you're putting out 19% to Jamaica, 16% to Townsend, and the votes are commingled or whatever. If this budget fails, what's your first step? As a board, what's your first step?
We have meetings like this where we say, okay, what do you want to see different? And I mean, we already know that this is a very high tax rate. You know, my hope is that if we you know, go back and maybe look at some more ways to bring this down, it's not going to get to. I mean, we need 1.2 million to cut to get under the excess spending threshold, and 1.2 million is. They asked for an example at the last meeting, and you know, it's like no more electives, no more AP courses, you know, bare minimums. So that's what 1.2 million looks like now. So we're not going to get to where we want to be in this budget without some really, really draconian cuts. So we would look at further cuts and we would talk about what we're going to do, but the real answer to this is not to continue to cut and do things the way we're doing now. It's to really sit down and have a serious conversation about how do we deliver education more to our students for less money.
But it's not unheard of that you have to come back to the drawing board if this, I mean, it's happened in the past. Jamaica has been, historically, has supported every single school budget that's ever been, not without question, but has always supported. Townsend has not. You've gone, I mean, I'm sorry, but you haven't. I mean, the Townsend, you know, so the possibility is that this may not pass is out there. So, I mean, Jamaica, to this point, has always said, okay, yes, if they're costing this amount of money, our kids are worth it. I mean, I've lived in Jamaica over 50 years, and I've never not, and served on school board for 15 of those years, and I've never not been, you know, supportive of a budget. But I've always asked questions, but I've been supportive of the budget. This one is tough, and I have to say, I just want to know, right away, are you going to get together and say, what are we going to do? Because if you have to come back, you have to come back. I mean, you have to have a budget. That's law.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm asking the question.
We would come back and figure it out.
Okay,
Exactly.
so you'll figure it out.
Your hand was up and then. Okay, Karen.
I'll go with that. Let's look at this from another angle.
Or not, Karen.
Instead of looking at it from the education standpoint, when this union merged, I was hoping that you would have more buying power. In other words, you got X number of teachers that are under insurance policy. Can you dicker with the insurance company because you've got this mass of teachers? Can you go to the fuel companies and start putting this stuff out to bid and say, we got this school, this school, this school, and this school. You know, what can you do for the price of oil? And every little bit could add up to a fair amount. You know, you got books. So you go to a publisher and you say, what can you do for this many books? We got this school, and this school. Now, I don't know if you're already doing that, but it doesn't look like there's any savings there.
Well, I can tell you this, the healthcare costs are now state mandated. You know, the state now negotiates the healthcare and sets the benefit rate. As for the others, I know we do some. Lori can probably speak to, you know,
Sure.
what we do and how we negotiate it, but we do have that.
Yeah, we do fuel, absolutely. I put out a bid every year and include Jamaica School. Actually, the town of Jamaica also comes in on the bid, and all the other schools.
But do you combine them?
Yeah, yeah. I take the total consumption for all the schools and put
I
that
know
up.
Townsend has a chip burner and nobody else does, so, you know, but that, it's hard to get anything off that fuel.
Right. Anywhere that we can combine, we are doing or plan to do.
Have been growing.
Karen.
Yeah, we've been doing
Karen, and
that.
then we'll come back up here.
I would like to ask that one of the board members that voted yes ask to unapprove the budget and you look at it and come back on the 27th.
Okay.
Does anyone want to do that?
Hang on. Emily?
I was just going to speak briefly to the impacts of of reducing. I mean, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I didn't vote, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But if we can, there's no question we can lower the budget. The school board has the authority to do that anytime they want, right? And if our budget fails, as Claire mentioned, our responsibility would be to come back and look again and see what we can do to, I mean, we're not actually required by law to lower it, but that is my assumption is that's what this board would do. The thing that I want to make sure everybody remembers is that, first of all, the driving factor behind, not the only factor, but the driving factor behind the challenges we're facing right now is the continuing decline in enrollment. And when if we're going to make cuts in any form here, we're reducing our programming in one form or another. That's what we will do, because we have no choice in that. And we know that, and we're prepared to do that if we need to. But for so many years, in all the years I've been a school board member here, it has been the decision of most boards that I've sat on over and over again to not reduce programming because we become less attractive to students. And so we have worked, we haven't succeeded always. We ended up losing the French program at Leland and Gray. It's not something any of us wanted to do, but we have reduced some programming. When I first started on the board here, we had, at Leland and Gray anyway, we had Latin, you know, that we did away with that a long time ago. We have reduced our programming, and the more we reduce our programming, the less attractive we become. And if we're less attractive, we have less and less students, which is what drives our, so it's a conundrum that we have to deal with. It does not mean that we cannot come up with other proposals to find other ways, without reducing our programming necessarily, to lower our spending. Whether we can do that, it's very unlikely for us to be able to do it before we have to vote on this budget to present it at town meeting day, because these are not decisions that this board will be making alone. Those decisions are significant, and they will have to be taken to the communities. Every community needs to have input into those decisions that we will have to make, and they're not simple. And we did it once. We did sit down and actually present to the communities a possibility of shifting the grade configurations throughout the buildings to save some, I don't know, it was $1 million, or I can't remember, 1.4 million at the time. And there was a huge outpouring then telling us not to do it. But times are different now, and that was only a year and a half ago or something. But I think that we're in a different place right now, and we're going to have those conversations, there's no doubt about it. But I just want to make sure everybody understands, if we do make cuts, we will cut our programming in one way or another. And it's going to be tough no matter what.
And I think we all realize that from Jamaica, and we're not
Yep, no, I hear you.
but Drew had some points, and I'm just asking that you look at it.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. Al, we got you, then Howie, then we'll go out to Paula. And Ken. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
So to kind of come back to Keegan's question about what can we do now versus later, and I would say, yes, we can touch on the margins and it might make sense to do that. But when also back to Patty's question about, what did we do to prepare this budget? So initially we got a budget that was a 7.7% increase. The board decided, let the budget committee go back and see what we can come up with. We decided to decrease 2%, try to get down to 5.7%. The administration pulled together the information they had, made as many cuts as they possibly could, came up with an additional $140,000, got us down to the current budget, 6.3%. And they said at that point, if we cut any more, we're going to cut deep and in programmatic. And so that's when we decided we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to go any further. And I completely agree with Keegan. We need a plan for the future. And I think that the budget committee will probably need to have multiple sessions each month for the next 6 to 9 months. I'm thinking more next year's budget, the budget after that. This is going to be a multi-year process in order to tackle that $1.2 million to get back to the education spending threshold. So the 6% increase in the budget, how does that translate to the 19%? It's all the things that have been talked about. The CLA. I mean, Jamaica got hit hard because of the combination of the CLA and the education spending being doubled. So it gets doubled, right? So it's think of a loan shark charging you an extra 100% on you being over. The penalty is extreme. So that is really what has caused us to go from the 6% to what ends up being 19% for you. And we're not going to solve that in a day. We're not going to solve it between now and the budget. We might be able to chip at the margins, and I'm sure that's what we'll do over the next couple of weeks, but there needs to be a longer term solution.
Okay, Howie, I think.
Yeah. I asked last meeting to see what a level funded budget, a cash, same dollar value, level funded budget would look like, but I was outvoted on that. I would still like to see what cuts, we know that there would be deep cuts involved. What deep cuts do we have to make to get to a level dollar funded budget so we can go to the voters and say, hey, we did our part. We held the line on spending. If your taxes are going up, it's not on us. We didn't generate any increase. And I think really that's our only chance of getting the budget passed, because I don't really see the communities swallowing this increase.
Hang on. You guys are so far down the line. Paul, I think it was you, then
Yeah.
Rick, then Jen, then, okay, go ahead. And then there's hands over here.
Is it true that you were thinking about cutting a teacher in Jamaica, the school in Jamaica? Has there been talk of that?
If
you don't mind me asking.
No, it's fine. Of course, I have to maintain flexibility for after parental school choice happens in March. But in order to create a budget with 9 students leaving the 5th grade and a projected 1 coming, there is a projected 2 teachers and a para-educator at Jamaica rather than 3 teachers.
I was just wondering if that would affect the students that might want to go back and when you would make that decision.
So after
March.
We will do all this,
Okay.
March will happen, and then the board will say, solve that, and I will have to do that.
Rick?
Yes, I may have misheard Emily, or she may have misspoke, because this is all kind of new. But there's one little piece of information I think we need to get right out for everybody here tonight. This budget will not be voted on at town meeting. Don't expect for this to come up at town meeting. I just want to make sure that we're perfectly clear on that. This is going to be voted on by Australian ballot on March 25th.
That's right.
So, you know, don't go to town meeting and expect to do anything, because that's not going to happen. I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear there.
Thank you. Jen?
I'd like to make a motion that we rescind the budget vote from last meeting and open up discussion and take a look at the areas that Drew pointed out.
I just want to make sure we get the motion right.
Okay, tell me what it is.
You got it. You got it.
You got it.
Is there a second for that motion? Okay.
Aaron, you got that?
Yeah. Okay. 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 It's been moved and seconded to rescind the budget that we put forward at the last meeting to allow us to take a look at some of the other things that have been brought up tonight. Any further discussion on that? Seems like we've been discussing it for about an hour and 45 minutes now. Okay, so no further discussion. You ready to vote? All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the motion carries. So we're still working with this budget, but it is no longer approved budget. We've received. Mike, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I just had a, hearing what the sentiment in the room is and thinking about things, I'm wondering if before March, we should be re-looking at the school choice policy, because my concern is, right now, it's like a max class room size, right?
Correct.
But as I pointed out earlier, a few more students, we could lose $90,000 small schools grant in Townsend. So maybe we want to reconsider that policy just to be forward-looking enough to say class size or total amount of students, because I don't, or we have to decide that we're fine with losing that small schools grant in Townsend. Either way, it might be prudent to relook at the policy before we open it up for choice to see, hey, if we can save, keep 90 grand from the state coming in, let's keep it coming in.
What's the guarantee on how long the school grants are coming in, Lori?
In perpetuity, right?
From the state.
In perpetuity, year by year.
Only the merger support grant.
Under 20 or under.
Does that,
Average class size 20 or under.
and
K
our policy is under 20?
We don't have a school size.
Gotcha.
We have individual classroom
Right.
size. And we do it
And it's both?
K3 and then 4-5.
It's a both.
And it's a both thing.
Is it actually over 2 year, it's a 2-year average too, 2-year
Ooh. Okay, good luck with that one.
Okay, so is that something we could ask the policy committee to just take a quick look at?
I will prepare something for the policy committee, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe you haven't spoken yet.
Who comes up with the threshold? I mean,
What
if-
threshold?
If the amount that they say we should be educating our child to, who comes up to that $17,000?
The commission.
Okay, so if all of the schools are having difficulty coming up with that amount to budget, wouldn't you think they'd rethink that amount of money? I mean,
They'll make it worse.
well, I mean, come on, I mean, it doesn't make any sense if every school, or they enjoy getting the excess money up in Montpelier, to sit there and wait for something to do with it. What else are they doing? They're not helping us if that money is just sitting up there.
No idea.
Maybe we need, who wants to run for mayor?
Ken?
Was there another one over there? I know you want to speak again. Was there another one over there? There were hands everywhere for a while. Okay. Go ahead, and I believe you had your hand up too as well, right? So go ahead, ladies first.
So I don't really have a question, it's more of a suggestion. 19% is scary, but I think with the right amount of communication and outreach to your community members, instead of scaring everyone away with what 19% looks like, not everyone is looking at that 19% increase. A good portion, so between 66 and 75% of Vermont residents qualify for the income sensitivity. And I think you might have a good opportunity of getting the things you want in your schools and the quality of education you want to provide, not only through the teachers, but for the children as well. If you guys could, I'm only here because I heard someone freaking out in a grocery store.
So if you guys want to step up your game of communication and clarity and education of your public, we would be more than happy to likely say yes to anything you want, because we do love our communities, we love our schools, our teachers, and our kids. But you gotta help us and understand what your aims and goals are. Like, let's talk about a multi-year plan. Let's have a night where you invite folks to come in and get a little bit of an education finance understanding. This is feasible. I would cut, like, please don't cut your programming. If anything, increase it. Come up with a cool budget that puts in awesome, like, give us an astronomy lab. I'll say yes. But you gotta find a way where you're better able to communicate, because 19% is gonna scare the bejesus out of people. Find a better way to communicate what those needs are and how we're going to do it. And that's the last thing I say. I promise.
I doubt it.
Well, for now, I'm actually gonna go
Can I
home because I have
just
to go to
respond?
school tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay, I just want to respond.
Go ahead.
to Keegan. So there are packets of information about the income sensitivity over there and how it's calculated. So I don't know that we have time tonight to go through all the steps. I'm happy to sit down with anybody. I'm not a tax expert, but I can walk through the formula. So.
Can we put that on the agenda for our next meeting?
To walk through the
To
income
walk through that? I think that would be a great idea, now that we're advertising it ahead of time.
Tax rate scenarios.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring that to the 27th.
Okay. I think you had your hand up next, sir, then you, then back to behind you. Go ahead, sir.
I'm stepping down the policy chair.
I'm still bandwagon. Just, I've been thinking something over. What is the mission of your board as far as student education? Are you trying to produce 100% college students? You're trying to produce 50% college students, 50% tradespeople? What are the counselors doing in talking to people in like their second year of high school, like they used to do when I went to high school? In other words, if I wasn't making grades to go to college, you sat down with the counselor and the counselor would say, look, Ben, I don't think you're ever going to be college material. Why don't we start talking about a trade?
You can't say that anymore.
No.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to say that anymore.
Maybe it's time for reality to start sinking in, because everybody's not going to be a college student.
It's a good question, and actually the answer is written on the back of our name tags, because it's something we want to keep in front of us. We sat down and worked through this as a district before we became operational. One of the first things we did was to come up with sort of our goal, our mission. And in the West River District, all students will have an outstanding educational experience in a safe and welcoming environment so that they may achieve and surpass their learning goals. The West River District is responsible to the needs of its community and provides the necessary systems, staffing, and resources needed to ensure that all of our students will become informed, empowered, and engaged global citizens. We've also talked about how that means that they're ready to go on to the next stage of life after high school, whether it be college or trades or the military service or straight into the job market. I mean, there are a number of pathways for kids after they leave high school, and we'd like to make sure that they're ready for whichever pathway they choose to try and pursue. That's our goal. That's a great question. That is a good question, thank you. I believe you were next, and then there was someone there. Okay, I got Scotty. Oh, I got Scotty too, okay. You first.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Bouchard, I'm from Jamaica. I just wanted to say thank you for wanting to reopen and look at the budget again. I found out about the 19% increase, and as a potential home buyer, I'm actually hoping to close on my home next year. It really put me off to where I was starting to look at other towns. But I think that if we just had a little bit more clearer communication as to how exactly it's being allocated, because you hear the 19% and you automatically freak out. It's, oh my God, you know? And I actually did the math, and it's another mortgage payment for my husband and I, who already work 2 jobs each, just to make ends meet. So it's gonna be very rough. It's gonna affect everybody. It's not just homeowners, it's gonna be renters. Their rent's gonna go up. I know a lot of people that survive on food pantry and emergency donations, and I'm sure it's not just something that's akin to Jamaica itself. It's all around southern Vermont, but it's a huge number. So as long as we keep the communication open exactly as to how this is being allocated. I'm saying thank you for willing to open it up and start looking a little bit more closely at hopefully shaving this down a little bit. Like 17% maybe? Please?
Patty, you had your hand up?
Yeah. I recall when we were doing Act 46, and we talked about doing like a 5-year plan and building budgets based on that 5-year plan. And I don't know how we go from being reactionary to proactive, but somewhere in there, I guess it has to flow somehow. And it sounds impossible to do myself, but I remember that and the high school I went to, that's how they did it. They made a 20-year plan, and they'd know when they were going to build a new elementary school for a town, when that building would be obsolete. And it seemed to work up to a point. I don't know where they are now, but I remember that was one of our goals during the Act 46, was to not be going through this every year, because you guys, it's hard, I know, and I appreciate all the really thoughtful time that you've spent. I watched the January 6th meeting, and it was painful. Just so, really appreciate all the time you put into it.
Scott.
I'm Scotty. I'm principal at Newbrook Elementary School, and the thing that's really striking me about this situation that I think is really unfair is that we're writing one budget that impacts all of the people in all 4 towns, and all of their children. And it sounds like we all agree that the kids deserve a great education, but it impacts us in drastically different ways by no fault of ours. And the people in Brookline are not looking at the same reality as you folks are looking at. And so I agree that this group right here maybe could shave or do little bits and pieces to make things better, but really the system itself is flawed and it's unjust. And the poor people of Jamaica are looking at a year where that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I was buying a house this year, I'd be doing the same thing you're doing.
Believe me, I wanted to run screaming.
But please don't think that's not this body's work, and I'm not part of this body, but that's not their work. Their work is to make a good budget that makes sense for the kids that we're serving. And I'll tell you, this year I feel like I've got what I need to serve the children in Newfane and Brookline and that come to my school. And I'm very, very appreciative of that. But again, I mean, I don't understand all the math and the figures behind this that leads us to a 19% for you and a 0% for Brookline. But I really feel like that's where the fault is. I think that our budgeting is. I really trust all these people, and I think our budgeting is what it needs to be, and maybe we can make changes. Maybe we can have another look. I'm not against that at all, but I just want to make sure that we all recognize that the people of Jamaica are here. You know, the people of Brookline are not here, and that's not because of the work we've done, but instead it's because of what's happening out of our hands. And it really, something needs to change, because I've been working really hard to get my school to have lots of kids in it, and I've been doing that by trying to brag about what we do. But if we get to nickel and dime our programming, that's not going to work, and then people will choose to buy houses in other towns, and I want them to buy houses in the towns I serve.
All right, Drew.
So I'm going to agree with Howie, which doesn't happen very often, but I'm going to agree with Howie. I think this administration can come back to this board with a budget that does not cut any programming, that's level funded through efficiency. I think you have a lot of talent. I think we've given you
Give me a lot of credit for
well, I'm going to recommend that we disband the budget committee in a little while, because you were right and I was wrong at that meeting. So I want to get to that. But I believe this administration can look at our schools, look at efficiencies, look at the staff that we have, and I think we can get this budget. I think they can do the work, and I think we can come back with a tax rate that's reasonable for everybody. And the idea, I still am struggling with this idea that we need, more people to do the same amount of work. No other business in the world works like that, and this one shouldn't either. So I think we look at tasking our administration with coming back with a budget that is level funded based on efficiency, not cutting programming for kids.
Could I ask clarification?
Sure.
So looking at the district summary sheet, you're talking the 739, 110 from this budget.
And don't forget that you can dip right in the superintendent's budget and grab some if you need to. I give you permission.
Is he making a motion?
I'll make that as a motion if that's what's necessary.
I'll second it.
Holy smokes.
Okay, as I understand it, it's been voted, it's been moved and seconded as a budget exercise to prepare a budget that has no programming and $740,000 from the current budget.
Not affecting programming?
Not affecting programming. So no student will lose a single opportunity in that.
I want to see that.
And if you can do it, I'm going to pay you whatever you can,
No, you
whatever
can't,
it
because that
costs
screws up the budget.
to do my personal budget, because I've never been able to do everything and spend significantly
Is
less.
the board okay with defaulting on your loan? I just want to know that. I'm just kidding.
Does that affect programming? Then, no. No? Okay, yes. So that's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Drew, as the motion maker, you get to speak first, if you want. Amen. Al?
So, $740,000. Does that get us under the equalized education spending?
No.
9%?
That's one, the
Half
1.2.
the
That's 1.2.
So that would still be over by about $500,000?
You couldn't even get to the 2%.
We'll be paying a lot less because it would get us lower.
So-
It wouldn't get us under.
I'm not sure if now's the time to kind of talk about the 5% protection. But I think it should be put out there that if you lower your budget enough to get your tax rate down, then Newfane, Brookline, and Townsend lose that protection. And there's nothing against Jamaica here. I'm just putting it out there that the lower you get your tax rate, right? So if you want to pick up this sheet, this is what I'm talking about. This was put in place as an incentive for a voluntary merger. And I'm perfectly fine with whatever the board decides. I just want to make sure everybody understands the reality here, right? The implications of... And we really are in a catch-22 here, right? I mean,
So you want to hold us harmful?
I don't want to do, I want to do whatever you want. I just want to point out that the lower that you get your tax rate, which has always been the purpose, right? Takes away any of this protection for those towns that are currently protected. Because it will surpass that 5% plus or minus.
How much longer do we have that?
So if you look on the front, and this is from the finance manager at the AOE, that it will last no longer than the 4 years of the 864 and 2 cent reductions, but it likely will be less lengthy than that, but I don't know what that means because it was not told. I think it's probably would be something the legislatures would deal with. So I just want everybody to be aware of that protection might go away. So once we get to that 0%, that cutting that 700,000, then we can look at that and see. But I just want to make sure everybody's keeping this in.
Sounds like that needs to be part of the exercise.
Yeah, well, it will be. I mean, it's a simple calculation. Well, it's not a simple calculation.
It's programmed in the system.
It's programmed.
Yes.
And will be, but it could impact that. So then Newfane would go up and Brookline would go up.
And without protection this year, Newfane's at what? Where's
So
that
it's
number?
on page, the back side.
18, remind me.
So with this protection,
Oh, it
it's getting late.
is. It's the other sheet.
1.951. So up 6.34% is what Newfane is up, 12 cents. Brookline is actually down a penny, and this is because of the CLA. Their CLA last year was, I want to say 99%, and it's 105.83%. So you see what you see what happens. That's nothing that is controlled by the board. That's something that happens with the CLA.
Just to clarify, without that 5% protection is on this sheet,
You would be $2.16.
it's 21% for Newfane, right?
Right.
So with, Jamaica's at 19 right now because they didn't get that protection. Newfane currently has it because the powers that be said so. If Newfane didn't qualify, Newfane this year would be at 21.
Correct.
If we lose the 5%, we're in that category. And eventually we lose the 5%, whether we like it or not.
Right.
So we're all clear.
Yes.
Mike?
Just wanted to relay something that I heard recently, just so everybody knows, it's not just our district. Grafton, what I heard was they did cut their budget 100,000 below last year, and they're still looking at a double-digit tax increase. So it really comes back to the convoluted state funding formula. But I mean, I'm all for reducing where we can reduce, and it's just letting you guys know it's not just this district, and even when you cut below last year's, you might still find you're not happy with what you get. So.
Well, if it's, as I said before to this gentleman here, that if the budget is exactly the same as last year, Jamaica's tax rate is still going to go up because of the CLA dropping.
Yeah.
CLA problem.
But not 20%, right? And we're fighting two things here, so it's not just the $700,000 increase, it's also $100,000 of decrease of revenue based on loss of tuition students. So
You're talking about cutting 8.
really, to keep, if you wanted to keep the tax rate level, yes, then that would be what you would do.
No.
But I think the motion was to cut, to level fund the expense budget.
Level fund, yes. Further discussion?
I'll just mention about the excess spending threshold one more time, because this doesn't get us below the excess spending threshold, but it reduces how much penalty we have to pay into the excess spending threshold. Am I right, Lori?
Yes, so,
Okay.
I mean, I can,
Well, I just want to say excess spending threshold, I mentioned it earlier, it was put into place. I'd be thrilled to see it go away myself, but it was put into place to keep spending, to help keep spending down. It does. School districts all across Vermont budget, just like we used to, right up to the excess spending threshold. And I'm sure Lori doesn't know how many school districts exceed the excess spending threshold, but there aren't very many. And there never have been very many. There may be more now than there used to be. I would be shocked if there weren't more now. But it's that money is taken by the state. It's put back into the education fund and redistributed out, and it may be part of that 8 point whatever. That's also sales tax.
yes, that's right.
So, but it goes back to everyone. It's just one for clarity.
Okay.
She has something.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to, since I have this widget that I built, right, so if we flatline the expense budget, right, and that's what's been asked, the 739, it gives you a unified tax rate of $1.89 with the current situation, which gives Jamaica $1.90 tax rate, which is a 4.4% increase. So 8 cents. And then all the other towns would stay, well, no, actually they
No.
probably would not stay the same. They would probably lose the protection at that point, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And will you build out that full chart and share it so that we know what would this impact would be on our fellow towns? In other words, you're going to come back with some information and you've said it will be something like this. So it would be helpful to know exactly what's going to happen to Newfane and Townsend and Brookline.
Yeah, yes. Once the work is done, I'll update all of the tax information with the most recent tax or state information that I have. Remember, I said the yield is going to change. The typically the threshold doesn't change, but it could. Go ahead.
But the numbers, you won't know the numbers until all budgets in the state are passed, actually.
That's true. That's true. And then the equalized pupils are still actually not finalized. There's another round of equalized pupils coming out this week, hopefully.
Bob?
So two questions. One, the motion. Is the motion to, what's the motion?
To keep looking at the budget.
Right,
No,
but was there a
it wasn't
specific,
that.
there was a specific
Yeah,
dollar
that
amount
wasn't the motion.
target? And if that, I guess my question is that what you want for a motion, or do you want a motion to see how close you can get to that point without reducing programming? Just a language difference, but I'm wondering if that, because what if, what if you can't get to that point without reducing programming for kids? Then we will have failed that directive from the board. But do you want to know how far we can get, if that's the case?
Can I answer it? Sure. So, I don't want it to be an easy exercise. Last time we asked for 2%, and the board, you came back and said no more than 1.7 or 1.3 or whatever it was. So, I think, adding language that says go as close as you think you can go doesn't kind of get the creative mind that I know you have working.
Well, I guess my point is, like, do you want to know what it would look like at that? Or do you want to know how much you can reduce without reducing programming? Because they're two very different things.
Can you come up with a way to not reduce programming and maintain the budget from last year?
No. I think we can tell you that right now. The answer is no.
So there's no efficiency that can be gained in any of our school operations right now?
$739,000 in efficiencies?
Right.
No. I mean, I don't know the entire budget, but I'm going to guess the answer is no to that question. Just based on the amount of money that is. The quick exercise we did last week, when I was asked about what it would cost, if Leland and Greg cut $600,000, I named pretty much what we were talking about as far as like 6, 7 teachers, and what that would do to decimate programming at the high school. That's not even the full 7. Now granted, we didn't look at the elementary schools, it was just a Leland and Greg issue, but I'm just wondering, if the reality is that you can't get there, there's no way to get there, what do you want? I mean, you want to know what you can do, or do you want to see what it looks like to cut 700?
So what I'm looking at is, and maybe I'm just looking for low-hanging fruit at this point. I'm just looking at 350,000 in new positions that we added. Well, you don't have them now. So you clearly don't have to have them next year.
Depends how you define that, but sure.
Okay, they're not here now. So maybe we start there. And then you look at things like I pointed out before, where I'm looking at budgets from 2 years ago where we've increased staffing, but we have less students. Well, maybe we can look at those staff members and can we get more out of them? Can we change the way that we utilize our employees to get more efficiency out of them? Maybe we can get teachers to teach one more class or another half block. There's possibilities that we could look at that I don't think we've actually explored. We haven't talked about what we can do with our employees to make a more efficient operation. You know, looking at, you know, the way that we contract with the SU employees. Can we do better hiring those employees ourselves? So, you know, there's some areas where we employ a 0.5 and we rent a 0.5. And we're paying benefits for both of those people, more so than we would if we had a single 1.0 that was employed here. So those are the type of efficiencies we could look at in this budget that we haven't actually even talked about. They're in there. When you start looking through it, you can see them.
Yeah, I guess at that level, I don't know, but what I know about is what's in my building. And I guess like the point I'm getting at is, to what extent do you want that to happen? Do you want that to happen at the expense of the board's mission? Do you want that to happen simply to get a number? And the reason I ask is that it sounds like what you guys are going to be faced with is a whack-a-mole. So let's say you cut $700,000, and let's say some magical way you do that without affecting programming, which I don't think is possible. Let's say you do. These guys' tax rates go down, and then next week after that, you have Townsend and Newfane in here complaining that their tax rates just went up double digits. So what have you done? So that's what I'm worried about. And I think one of the things that the Wyndham Southeast District has really struggled with, and they came to this merger concept a much different path than this community did. But one of the things that they really struggled with is the idea of like coming together as a community to educate their kids. And I think one of the things, I get it being a taxpayer in a particular town, how that affects me and my tax rate. But I think one of the ways that we have to move forward as a board, and the way we have to move forward as a community, is to think about this as a collective. All right, we're educating a collective of kids from 4 towns. And because of things outside of our control, it's going to be all over the place about how it affects our taxes. If we're talking about having an outstanding educational experience, I mean, that's a high bar. And I just want to make sure that that's what you guys are asking for and pushing for. And I'm not saying it at whatever cost, obviously. You have to have some efficiencies and you have to have some responsibility around that. But I don't want it to become an exercise in pitting towns against other towns, which is what you're dangerously close to getting towards. And I worry about that because I think that could really tear this community apart. And I feel like if we start to play that whack-a-mole game, that's a dangerous game to play. So, and obviously no disrespect to the Jamaica folks, they're the ones, they're the mole sticking up right now. But I just want you guys to think about this. It's a collective. We're educating a group of kids together collectively, and we're sharing our monies, well, with the state really, to do so. And that's something we got to just keep our eye on. That's all.
So my thought on that is that it seems likely in my mind that, say you magically come up with this number that you feel like you're not going to be able to, whatever. You come to us, you say, here's where we're at. I don't think that necessarily we're going to say, well, all right, and we're 100% done now. We may say, okay, well, now let's put something back or whatever, but to know where those efficiencies are, to have done the exercise, to really look hard and creatively, and, you know, the budget keeps going up, the students keep going down. It's not only student costs. We've added positions, we've added administration, we've added everywhere along the way. From a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if we have less students, why do we have more staff? Why do we have more administrators than we did when we had more students?
At Leland Ray, we don't have more staff. We have less staff than we did 4 years ago when I started here. So we have almost 8% less staff. And no, we've lost more than 8% of the students. I grant you that, but there's an economy of scale with which you have to operate within.
Of course.
So we've lost staff. I mean, every year I've reduced. Every year I've been asked to reduce by the board. Every year I've reduced. I've had those hard conversations that Keegan was talking about with the staff. And my concern about where this goes potentially is that the morale of the staff plummets when you start talking about all these things. And because that number is such a big number, it's staff. There's no way around it. And maybe we can nickel and dime some efficiencies. I'm not going to take away from that point because I just don't know. But when if you're going to talk about a number that high, you're going to talk about staff. And and if it's an exercise in futility, and you're not going to do it, There's implications to this, that's all I want people to understand, there's implications to this, and it impacts the community, so.
You mentioned that actually in the.
I did. And, you know, then we had a budget document that showed a 20% increase. And, you know, then I start really kind of digging into it and looking through and seeing that we've added a lot. And we continue to add a lot. And, you know, I think, you know, I've raised a fair amount of questions about this budget and whether we put enough effort into making this budget efficient. So, you know, 2 meetings ago, I said, yeah, let's not do an exercise that we're not willing to get to. But I think we have to do the exercise because the budget that was presented wasn't presented with efficiency in mind. You know, I still can't understand how we're adding 4 positions to maintain where we're at. I cannot wrap my head around paying 4 full-time employees to get nothing more out of them. And that's where I'm saying, like, we could probably do without those people, and maybe you could rearrange some other people that already work here to fill whatever role it was that we were planning on filling. Again, looking at the agency budget and some of the new positions that were created through the agency fund that we didn't really talk about. And maybe we can cut some of those positions. When we start adding those up, you get to 350,000 pretty quick. And maybe 700 is too much. Maybe we should set a number at 500. I mean, I can count at 350 while I was sitting here, so that wasn't hard. Well, maybe 500 should be our target.
Can I ask him a question?
Sure.
What if those positions that you're describing are part of losing programming?
They don't exist now.
Well, I wasn't here, so I didn't hear the explanation for all those positions, but I would assume that we all know what those positions are for.
It was at the previous meeting, though. The
Okay.
12-9 meeting, all the
But we haven't-
principals spoke to those positions.
We have an understanding about what those positions were being put into place for, and that's to serve our students. So this is a reduction in services for students. It's important that we recognize what we're talking about when we talk about positions. Now, I don't know if, you know, if you could cut an administrative assistant or something like that, that you might not apply to that, but I don't think those 4 positions were, I think they were services for students in one way or another.
Future services for students.
But not current.
So is our budget future?
I guess you
In
guys.
some cases, they were increasing services, right?
Yeah, but based on need.
Based on need of a building. And I mean, maybe the principals could talk about that.
We've got the written documentation, too. Howie, go ahead.
I feel for you, Bob. I mean, you're being put in a really difficult position. The thought that I have along the lines of what Keegan was saying is that we have to do more with less. So to leverage what we have, I know like MIT has the open source, the MIT college program online, open source, multiple classes where kids are, you know, people can take MIT level technology classes online. Can we leverage, you know, we have super high speed internet, we have computers. Can we open up, replace maybe a section of advanced placement something with a section of supervised learning where kids could take whatever MIT course they want, whether it's an AP Math or an AP English course, and do it on their own with a teacher looking over their shoulder to help them. And instead of offering a dedicated teacher for that subject, which would both enable us to, you know, cut down our staff a little bit, increase our class size, and still offer a bigger selection of courses to kids. So that's my creative suggestion on how do we get to the point where we offer more programming for our kids with less teachers. And this is all new stuff. I mean, MIT is adding courses to this every month. I mean, there's always more stuff coming out. And MIT is not the only thing out there. There's many. I mean, we should really look into it.
Leanne?
I really don't think there's any problem with looking for additional efficiencies. I live in Brookline. I'm the one member on the board in the lucky town this year. However, that number is artificial based on that 5% that could go away at any time. based on the less likely than the 4-year. So I don't see why it would hurt to look and see what we can reduce now. The longer we hold off and don't look for these efficiencies, the harder it's gonna be to find them. That's my opinion.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, well, so say this gentleman say pitting town against town. I think that's off the board, because that's no, in my opinion, that Jamaica is here. Jamaica's here to want to know what they get for their 19%. They're not saying they're not going to pay their taxes. We want to know what we get for 19%. And Jamaica has not got some of the things that other towns have gotten. So bottom line, and people can correct me in the back, but this is what we're here for. I mean, yes, we're crazy that our taxes are going to go up. But it's not that we want Newfane's or yours to go up, like they're saying it may go up anyhow. So I think to say that is unfair, that we'll be pitting towns against towns, because I don't think that's what this is about. And I think people with the thinking mind will understand that. I think it's more about Jamaica is here en masse to say 19% is a lot of money, and what are we as a town, as a school, getting for it? That's bottom line. And I know that it's getting late, but I really feel that needed to be said.
Okay, any more discussion on the motion?
Well, I would just say I'd love you to contemplate the amendment of 500,000. If it was 500,000 and keep going, I think that would provide a good goal for the task to be accomplished, both for what the board is looking for and with the reality of possibly making it.
If you're gonna be hard, stay hard, okay? If you're gonna make hard choices, stick with it.
Can you be successful at 500, Bill? Because I think we can do better than this. I really do.
I think that
we
would
can do better.
I think if the motion was find us 500, but don't stop. If you can keep finding efficiencies to get to the 739, I'm not going to get to 501 and say doop, done. If we're rolling and we got creative juices flowing, I mean, I want to be realistic about what we can bring back to you, and I want to be challenged to dive deep. And I think that $500,000 would be a good place to start. And if on the 27th that is not good to go, we can go till the 3rd. And, you know, it'll be tight on publishing, but if we need to go to February 10th, we can do that as well. So I would appreciate it in working with my colleagues if the number 500,000 was the direction of the board.
Al?
Lori, are there any efficiencies that you did not look at in the last 3 or 4 months that we've actually been working on the budget?
I mean, we looked at a lot of different efficiencies, and, you know, clarification is custodial, is that considered programming? I mean, so I just need some clarification on, you know, is that what you're talking about for efficiencies, if we cut all the custodial staff? Because that doesn't involve programming. So I just, you know, clarify a little bit more about programming, I guess, would be helpful for me personally.
So I guess, can I answer that?
Sure.
So maybe, have you looked at contracting that service? I'm not saying it's cheaper, but that would be a way that you may be able to say, well, maybe we could contract custodial services and save money. I don't know if you can or not, but those are the type of things, yes, you should have that conversation, because we haven't done anything with our custodial services, so maybe we should look at something like that. So it's exactly the places where you should be looking for efficiencies.
Okay.
I'll just say that I completely disagree with this altogether. And my vote will be no.
No, sorry.
Oh, I thought you had something to say.
No.
Sorry. Yell it out.
Okay, so any more comments? Drew?
I will be willing to, make a friendly amendment to my own motion to 500,000 if the administration is going to give it a serious look and come back at the next meeting. And they tell me that that's reasonable and they can do it. I will amend my own motion, I think.
I'm not part of that, but I would expect the administration is going to take any motion we make seriously.
All right, so who seconded that motion?
Now we do.
I do. Yeah, sure, I'll second that revised motion.
All right, so now the amendment is to shoot for 500,000 and keep going if you can in efficiencies. Still not affecting programming. And have it ready for the 27th. Yes?
I would say that we want to get it to the board by the 24th, so that some digestion could occur before the meeting.
A little weekend reading. Perfect.
And, so if we're not able to find these efficiencies, or the efficiencies aren't deemed appropriate, what would we fall back to for the budget?
We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah.
I guess I would look at the personally, my approach to this would be take a look at the 500,000, say, we got to put some back, and then start putting back things piecemeal and get it done. But yeah,
When does the budget need to be approved by?
February 10th.
February
is the
10th is
stretch date.
the stretch day.
Emily.
I'm gonna ask you once, I'm pretty sure you answered this once already, but did you ask this as an exercise? I thought that was what your motion said.
Yes.
So this is not a recommendation. I think that's really clear, that this, whether you agree with it or not, this is not being asked to reduce our budget, it's being asked to do an exercise in review, I guess, is what I would try to interpret what you're saying.
Right, show us what it would look like. Don't necessarily.
So that kind of,
Yeah. You got a feel for it. It's academic. All right, any further discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? The ayes have it. All right. So that's, and then we'll have it the weekend before so that we can take a look at it. In addition to that, the tasks out of there are to get the agency fund breakdowns of the agency fund increases and also a better explanation of each line item increase. Is that fair? Did I capture that? Okay?
Ooh,
What?
every line item?
Well,
Okay.
I guess the ones that, like,
we didn't say that in the motion.
Take every line and put your mission right on
well, wait a
that
second,
line.
wait a second.
See if you need it or not.
I've got agency fund, an explanation about the behavior specialist, technology fund in greater detail.
Those were all the agency fund ones. The line items were really just the ones that we had done this year, but since we're,
I think those play right into the
yeah,
agency
those play
fund.
right into the agency fund, so that was just extra. Okay, so we're done with budget? They have to, for now, till 2 weeks?
And the room empty.
No. No meeting on the 20th. Okay, so, new business.
So much time.
We have some pay orders that didn't get approved, they got reviewed. Yes, sir.
Or take time to meet, definitely don't stop that.
No, no, we're gonna have to come, oh, right. Suppose we gotta circle back to that. So we have to set a tuition rate.
Oh, we're not done here.
No. So I would just reiterate, I know the board's going to have a discussion. We shared kind of the comparables. I understand the logic about what you would want to charge. My recommendation is the 17.9, which is on the high end of your neighbors. And
14 for elementary.
14.4.
14.4 for
So the
elementary.
two separate ones.
Yep.
It's up to the board to decide. After our last meeting, because I'm the superintendent for all the districts and we have sending districts, Marlboro really doesn't matter because we don't have any students coming here from Marlboro. But River Valley sends a substantial number of students and they've already approved their budget. So same thing I would do for you guys if the roles were reversed. I just let them know that this discussion was happening because if, for example, they are sending you 40 students, a $2,000 to $4,000 increase is 80 to 160 on their budget. So I just wanted to let them know that this discussion was happening about that. So I totally understand where you're coming from in the conversation. I would recommend 17.9.
Sure.
Do we need to decide right now if we would ask for the reimbursement we're legally allowed to ask for? Do we need to decide if we're gonna ask for it or no?
I think that needs to be a conversation. I don't know if it needs to be tonight.
Is there like a
I think there
timeline?
needs to be an agreement.
You have to set a tuition tonight.
Yeah, you
But
have,
not the whether
But
we
the-
ask.
I mean,
reimbursement
historically,
later?
you guys have never done that.
right.
So you,
There still needs to be something.
it would be a good idea for
Voted
just,
on tonight.
whether you do it or you don't do it, it would be good to have clarification with your neighbors.
So right tonight though, at the same time that we do the tuition.
Well, they're separate.
No, they're separate.
They're separate things.
They
One
could
is
be.
setting the tuition.
Right, but do we need to decide at the same time is what I'm
Well,
asking?
you're gonna have to have an agreement, so you're gonna have to talk, you're gonna have to have a representative from your board
Yeah.
talk to a representative from your other boards to make that happen.
So, guys, if I understand, we seem to have an understanding right now,
Exactly.
but we don't have an agreement.
Correct.
Because you're a new board, so I think there may have been an agreement with Leland and Gray and the other boards
Right.
at one
20
time.
years.
I would have to probably call Frank up and ask him, but
I always thought we did allowable, maximum allowable. We used to do maximum allowable,
well,
but that was a long
as
time
long
ago.
as I've been here, I've never seen it being
Yeah.
billed back, but,
So,
yeah.
so history in this case doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's the point.
No, but I think that the question was, do we have to decide today if we're gonna bill back the up to 3% to the other board? And I'm hearing no, we don't have to decide that today.
Right, we do not have to decide.
We just have to set the tuition.
We have to set a tuition.
You have to set tuition and you should have a. you
And then we should
have the
decide whether
chair
we're gonna
to
do that,
talk
and then
to
we
them.
can go out and negotiate with the other boards and put an agreement in place.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the numbers of 19.9.
17.9?
17.9 and 14.4 for the set the tuition rates.
Second.
Okay,
Is it 14?
Elementary.
And, oh, wait a minute, and also to have the board chair go into negotiations with the other districts on setting the allowable rate discussion.
can we do that separately? Because before we go discussing.
If you would like that, we can do that separately.
Well, just because before we go start negotiating, let's see what exists in the past, if it's.
Well, that's what I mean,
actually
bring it
written
to them and
anywhere.
find out what's going on, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I would appreciate
But
two
we'll do a separate motion
Okay.
for that, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
You good with
so-
that, Howie? Okay, we're good with that.
So there's a motion to accept
good,
the
Mike.
recommendation of the administration and set tuition at 17.9 and 14.4 for elementary. Any discussion on that? Further discussion?
I would just like to say that I think if we set our rates higher than Burr and Burton, that there's a reasonable chance that we would lose some students to that.
There's I would say a high chance. Okay, so, ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, now we can move on to pay orders. We have reviewed pay orders for November and December. There's the signed, checked off, reviewed pay orders in here by Trish and myself. But we've never actually approved them at the meeting. So, and we also apparently have to approve payroll pay orders, and quite a few of them, because we were approving pay orders but not payroll pay orders. So we need a motion to approve the November pay orders in the amount of, one in the amount of $39,942.24, and the other in the amount of $93,500. $497.88. And then December's payable run of $179,464.88.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right. Any discussion on that? We do have the logs that we've gone through and checked them all. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, those are passed. We also have payrolls.
Payrolls don't have to be approved by the board because they're a contracted amount.
Yeah,
Apparently,
it's a formality, but our auditors actually asked us.
wanted us to do this. So,
Okay.
for our
Something new.
auditors, we need a motion to approve payroll pay orders 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15, 20, 21, 22, 23, 29, 30, 32, 33, 35, and 36, for a total of $2,251,299.91.
Why not the missing ones?
I don't know. What's with the missing ones?
The monthly pay orders, so it goes, they use the same sheet to. I'm
So
tired,
the
I'm
numbers,
sorry.
like number 5 is a monthly.
It's a monthly
Okay.
AP.
Pay order, okay.
I'm reading them
This
going,
one, okay.
did you just do this to torture me?
So moved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Seconded.
Second. Any questions, discussion on that motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay. One last thing. We apparently have been paying late fees on some of these bills because of how meetings fall. Pay orders are ready, lease payment needs to be done, credit card payment needs to be made, and as you all know from your personal lives, they're very inflexible about due dates. And sometimes because of where the board's meetings falls, we pay late and end up paying late fees. So, we checked, Lori got some motion language from the auditors and discussed it with the treasurer and worked it all out. And we would like to propose, or Lori would like to propose and have us allow the business office to pay invoices that will incur a late fee outside of the board meeting schedule.
You can add the treasurer.
And the treasurer.
As well.
Thank you, Rick. The total of the invoice should not exceed $5,000, and the warrant will be retroactively approved by the board at a future board meeting. And this is just simple cost savings for us.
I would love to make that motion.
All right. Would
I'll
anyone
second
love
it.
to second it?
I would love that.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions on this? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay,
Abstentions?
efficiencies, people.
All right, the motion carries. Thank you very much. I have these motions for you, Aaron. You don't have to struggle. Okay? Okay. We've moved tax rate scenarios to the 27th. Public school choice.
We have a
That's-
recommendation from our principal of our high school.
Yes, you do.
It's in the back of your packet, guys.
So,
The language is on the very last page of your stapled agenda.
But we set this every year.
yeah,
Students that
understand,
we
well,
allow
this
in,
will be, I think, the
students that we
first
allow
time
out.
this board has done it, I think.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been on Leland and Gray, and so we did it. I'm used to it.
So the statute requires it talks about two different things. There's the transfer limit, which is the students leaving for high school choice. And there's the capacity, there's limits of students coming in. When the transfer limits a setting school, you see where I wrote may limit the number of residents who can transfer out. But there's some recommendations about how to do that. My recommendation, we haven't in a long time, is had a limit out. We don't need to set one, there's no reason to set one. We lose 1 or 2 kids, maybe a year, usually 1. Just doesn't seem like it's something that's worth capping. If it was a much bigger issue, then I can see why it'd be an issue, but at this point, I don't think. The recommendation on the transfer limits would be to not have one. On the capacity, that's a shall define and announce its capacity. This is how many kids we can take in. So that's a requirement, we must set that. And again, our numbers coming in are in the 1 to 2 range. So it's kind of a wash overall, but I think the last couple of years, Leland Gray Board set a cap at 20. nowhere near it, but you have to set something. So that was my suggestion.
So moved.
Second. You can have
Seconds
it.
all over.
Mike can have it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to accept the recommendations of the administration with respect to transfer limits and capacity. Any further discussion on that or questions? No? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Any additional tasks other than the budgetary ones?
I think we should.
Other assignments? We should what?
I'm not gonna ask anything else, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm not gonna ask anything else. All right, are we done?
Well, so just to be clear, the exercise, the 24th to the board, 500K.
No minutes.
Or more.
Is it going,
Or more if you're on a roll.
Absolutely.
Or more if you're on a roll. I'm sorry?
is it going through the budget committee? I know
Oh.
Drew made
Right,
a
yes.
point before.
Let's talk about it. Thank you.
I want to put minutes on
Next meeting's agenda.
next meeting's agenda, so we can approve last meeting's agenda, or minutes.
Yeah, I gave them to you so that you guys could read them. I'm trying to get them ahead. I just forgot to put on the I
Well,
tried. You didn't buy that, Jen?
No.
It'll be on the next agenda. The 6th and the 13th.
You forgot.
That's fine, it can go through the administration.
Yes, could we answer that question about the exercise? Does the exercise go to the budget committee? Does it go to everybody? Does it go to everybody and the budget committee? Do we show it, the budget committee, a draft on, Wednesday, and get feedback before it goes to the board? That would be helpful. Clarification.
I would like the information come to the entire board.
Okay. Come to the entire board on the 24th, right?
Got it.
Okay.
You had made a comment about being wrong about budget committee.
Put that on camera again?
Could you elaborate on that? Because I was wrong, you were right, and that was it. What were you wrong about? What was?
Wait,
We'll discuss that at the next meeting. I'll say
Yeah.
it again. 2 meetings in a row that I was wrong.
No, I hear
Okay.
it all the time from you. No.
so we don't have any committee assignments for the next meeting. We don't have an executive session. We will have a consent agenda with minutes in it. One more motion, folks. Who wants to
Move
make
to
it?
adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
I want to say,